Section 2. Acknowledgments. The most frequently performed notarial act is an acknowledgment. An acknowledgment is the notarial certificate attached to a document when the notary public confirms the identity of the signer and the signer acknowledges being the signer of the document. The certificate of acknowledgment is identified by the wording, whose name is subscribed to the within instrument and acknowledged to me that he executed the same. A certificate of acknowledgment often will be found at the end of a document. By completing a certificate of acknowledgment, the notary public is certifying under penalty of perjury that the signer personally appeared before the notary public on the date indicated and in the county indicated in the venue heading, to the identity of the signer based on satisfactory evidence, and that the signer acknowledged signing the document. California Civil Code, Section 1189. To perform an acknowledgment, a notary public must examine the document for completeness, confirm the identity of the signer based on satisfactory evidence, and the signer's acknowledgement of the signature, complete a journal entry for the transaction, and attach a completed certificate of acknowledgement to the document, or complete the certificate of acknowledgement at the end of the document. California Civil Code Section 1188. By completing a certificate of acknowledgement, the notary public is not certifying the legality of the underlying document. A. Examine for completeness. A notary public cannot take an acknowledgement of an instrument, document that is incomplete. The notary public should visually scan the document, and if the document appears to be incomplete, the notary public must refuse to take the acknowledgement until the document is completed. However, in determining whether the document is complete, the notary public should ignore information that is intended to be added later, such as information to be placed on the document by a county clerk or recorder, or for additional signers whose signatures are not being notarized by the notary public. California Government Code, Section 8205A2. B. Confirm identity of signer and acknowledgement of signature. A notary public must confirm that the person signing the document and acknowledging the signature is the person described in the document as the signer. A notary public must confirm the identity of the signer by obtaining satisfactory evidence. The signer's identity may be established by the oaths or affirmations of one or two credible witnesses, or the signer may present the required identification document. With respect to taking an acknowledgement and completing the certificate of acknowledgement, the signer does not need to sign the document in front of the notary public, but the signer must personally appear before the notary public and acknowledge to the notary public that he or she signed the document. California Civil Code Section 1189. C. Journal entry. A notary public must record the following details in their sequential journal about every acknowledgement performed. California Government Code, Section 8206. Time and date of the act. Indicate that the type of notarial act performed was an acknowledgement. Best practices tip. The notary public should write out the word acknowledgement rather than use any type of abbreviation. Type of document. The type of document usually will be stated in the title of the document. If the document does not have a title, ask the signer to describe the purpose of the document and record the signer's description in the journal. Signature of the person signing the document. Indicate that satisfactory evidence of the signer's identity was obtained. The notary public's sequential journal must contain a statement that the identity of a person making an acknowledgement was based on satisfactory evidence. California Civil Code Section 1185. Details of how the identity of the signer was established. If the identity was established by examination of an identification document described in California Civil Code sections 1185B3 and B4, the notary public must record the type of identification document, the governmental agency that issued the identification document, the serial or identifying number on the identification document, and the date the identification document was issued or expires. If the identity was established by the oath or affirmation of one credible witness, then the notary public must record the name of the credible witness, and the credible witness must sign the notary public's journal, or the notary public must record the type of identification document presented by the credible witness, the governmental agency that issued the identification document, the serial or identifying number on the identification document, and the date the identification document was issued or expires. California Government Code Section 8206A2D. As noted previously, best practice would be to obtain the signature of the single credible witness and record the information for the identification document of the single credible witness to ensure complete information is available for a public request. A California Secretary of State inquiry, a civil or criminal subpoena, or a peace officer investigating a crime. If the identity was established by the oaths or affirmations of two credible witnesses, then both credible witnesses must sign the notary public's journal. The notary public must record the name of each credible witness, the type of identification document presented by each witness, the governmental agency that issued each identification document, the serial or identifying number on each identification document, and the date each identification document was issued or expires. California Government Code Sections 8206A2D and E. Fee charged for the Notarial Act. Right thumbprint of the signer if the type of document is a deed, quitclaim deed, deed of trust, or other document affecting real property other than trustees' deeds resulting from a decree of foreclosure or a non-judicial foreclosure or a deed of reconveyance, or a power of attorney. 1. Sample journal entries. The California Secretary of State does not endorse or recommend any particular commercially printed notarial journal. Any journal that includes space for recording all the required details is acceptable. Many commercially printed notarial journals have space for recording other information not required by California law, such as the date of the document, the address of the signer, and transaction notes. Most notarial journals provide for recording the details of a transaction across 2 pages. The record begins on the left and is completed on the facing page. Each page has corresponding numbered lines and the transaction details to be recorded online. One of the left page, for instance, correspond with transaction details to be recorded online. One of the facing page. The following example demonstrates recording the details of a transaction across 2 pages. D. Certificate of Acknowledgment. A certificate of acknowledgment must be completed at the time the notary public's signature and seal are affixed to the document. The certificate of acknowledgment cannot be added to or altered after the notary public's seal and signature are affixed to the document. California Civil Code Sections 1188 and 1193. Under no circumstances can the signature and seal be affixed in advance of the notarization of a signature. California Government Code, Section 8214.1J. Since January 1, 2006, the California Certificate of Acknowledgment has been required to be exactly in the form in California Civil Code Section 1189, rather than substantially in the form in the statute. California Civil Code Section 1189. Also, the certificate of acknowledgment must be executed under penalty of perjury. California Civil Code, Section 1189. The following specific disclaimer must appear at the top of the certificate of acknowledgment. A notary public or other officer completing this certificate verifies only the identity of the individual who signed the document to which this certificate is attached, and not the truthfulness, accuracy, or validity of that document. It must be in an enclosed box, appear at the top of the certificate, and be legible, i.e., in a font or typeface that is readable and does not impair its readability. California Civil Code Section 1189. Since variations in the California form are not permitted, a notary public must ensure that if a document contains a suggested certificate of acknowledgment, the certificate must have the statutory wording required by California Civil Code, Section 1189. If not, then a separate certificate of acknowledgment with the correct exact statutory wording must be used and attached to the document. California Civil Code Sections 1188 and 1189. A notary public may complete an out-of-state acknowledgment form that will be used in another state or territory of the United States as long as the notary public does not determine or certify that the signer holds a particular representative capacity or make other determinations and certifications not allowed by California law. California Civil Code, Section 1189C. For example, a notary public could not complete an out-of-state acknowledgment form on a document to be recorded out of state if it requires the California Notary Public to certify the signer is president of a particular corporation. In such a case, the California all-purpose acknowledgment form must be used instead of the out-of-state acknowledgment form. In addition, the California all-purpose acknowledgment form must be used for any document that will be used in another country. Any certificate of acknowledgment taken within this state must be in the following form. California Civil Code, Section 1189. A notary public seal and signature cannot be affixed to a certificate of acknowledgment without the correct notarial wording. The first part of the certificate of acknowledgment, indicating in what county the notary public and person making the acknowledgment are located, is the venue statement. The venue statement establishes where the notary public performed the acknowledgment and where the signer personally appeared before the notary public. The state is always California, since the notary public has jurisdiction only within California. The county should be completed with the name of the county where the signer personally appeared before the notary public and acknowledge the signing of the document. Since a notary public can provide services anywhere within California, the county in the venue statement may not necessarily be the county where the notary public maintains his or her principal place of business, or the county where his or her oath and bond are filed, but must be completed with the name of the county where the notarial act took place. The day, month, and year must be completed with the date the signer personally appeared before the notary public and acknowledged signing the document. The notary public must insert his or her name and title Notary Public where indicated, and the name of the person who acknowledges their signature on the document after personally appeared. Then the notary public must sign and stamp the certificate with the notarial seal. California Civil Code, Section 1193. Penalties. A notary public who completes a certificate of acknowledgment that contains statements the notary public knows to be false may be liable for civil penalties and administrative action. California Government Code Section 8214.15. Additionally, the notary public will be guilty of forgery if he or she issues an acknowledgment, knowing it to be false. California Penal Code Section 470D. A person who falsifies the acknowledgment of a notary public may also be guilty of forgery. California Penal Code Section 470D. Forgery is punishable by imprisonment in the state prison or by imprisonment in the county jail for not more than 1 year. California Penal Code Section 473. False certification by a notary public also may be a misdemeanor. California Government Code Section 6203. Additional penalties for failing to enter required information in the journal or falsely modifying journal entries are discussed later in this course. Example: on January 5th, 2016, Abe Signer signs a document for his corporation at Abe's corporate office in San Joaquin County. On that same day, Abe then takes the document to Nancy Notary to have Abe's signature notarized. Nancy first must establish Abe's identity. Nancy establishes Abe's identity by checking Abe's driver's license issued by the California Department of Motor Vehicles. In front of Nancy, Abe acknowledges that it is Abe's signature on the document. Nancy then needs to fill out the journal. Nancy's journal must include the date, time, and type of act. Nancy needs to have Abe sign the journal. Nancy also needs to make an affirmative statement in the journal that Abe's identity was based on satisfactory evidence, and that the evidence Abe presented Nancy with was Abe's driver's license, issued by the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Abe's driver's license number and the date of issue or expiration of the driver's license. Nancy enters the fee charged for the notarial act. Last, Nancy fills out the certificate of acknowledgment, as shown below. Nancy enters the name of the county where Nancy and Abe are physically located, the date of the notarial act, January 5th, 2016, Nancy's name and title, and Abe's name as it appears on Abe's identification. Nancy then signs the certificate, stamps it with Nancy's seal, and attaches the certificate of acknowledgment to the document.